What's up guys, it's my geography channel, and for this video we're going to be talking about why wasn't Ethiopia colonized like its other neighbors Sudan, Eritrea, Somalia, and Kenya, and more. So we're going to be talking about that. The answer to your question is in this video. So as we all know, Africa is the poorest continent in all of the continents, just only because the Europeans stole all the materials we needed. But who cares, that was years ago. And Ethiopia was not colonized, but Ethiopia is rich. It's not the richest countries in the world, obviously, but Ethiopia is one of the richest in Africa because Ethiopia has some good natural resources. Same for South Sudan too. They both have good natural resources. And Ethiopia, they have good natural lakes, rivers, and fresh water and fresh Blue Nile River to drink out of. And now we're going to be talking about why Ethiopia wasn't colonized. So as we all know, back then in the late 19, not the late 19, like back ago, when Africa was being colonized by the British, Belgium, Italy, and lots of other European countries. Italy, back then, Eritrea was part of Ethiopia. The reason how Eritrea was colonized was Eritrea, back then it was part of Ethiopia, and back then they never really saw war much, so they weren't used to war. So when Italy was trying to do bad stuff with Eritrea couldn't really do anything because they never saw war, so they never thought that they would needed to get military weapons and stuff like that. They weren't really educated much about that. So they were just like Eritrea was like basically a little kid, you could say, and they didn't really know much about war because they were just wanted to be a peaceful country. So Italy took over, and then yeah. And then there's the UK. The UK colonized Egypt and Sudan, and the UK isn't stupid, but it has done stupid things when it was making the Egypt and Sudan border. I don't get how Halib belongs to Sudan and Bir Tawil belongs to Egypt. But anyway, how Ethiopia wasn't colonized is really simple, and it's not going to take that long. Other YouTubers, they want to make it take so long by just bringing up a lot of... Some things are good, but some, they bring up things that aren't necessary. So I'm just going to give you two straight. The way Ethiopia wasn't colonized, because the way Italy colonized Eritrea is because Eritrea has a sea. So the Italians went through the Mediterranean Sea, and then they went through the Suez Canal into the Gulf of Suez, and then entering the Red Sea, and then go to Eritrea, and then they go on the coast of some cities, and then they start taking over. And in the UK, same thing. Not as Italy, but what I'm trying to say is Ethiopia is landlocked, and the reason why the Italians couldn't get Ethiopia was because look at Ethiopia. You don't see any access to any oceans or sea, right? Because Ethiopia is landlocked, and no country can roll up on the coast because it doesn't have any. And besides, the Italians, even if Ethiopia wasn't landlocked, back then the Italians, most European countries weren't really interested in Ethiopia that much. Ethiopia wasn't really a country that brightened up their mind, so they were just going to say, let's leave Ethiopia. Because back then in Italy, Eritrea was the golden dime and Ethiopia was just a silver dime. So what I'm trying to say is Italy wanted the gold, but the silver was useless. So they didn't really care. Cause Ethiopia, back then, Italy didn't really care about it that much. Italy only wanted the good countries. Italy wanted the countries that have access to any sea or ocean. So, for examples, that's why I colonized Somalia and Eritrea and other countries in Africa too. So that's why Ethiopia wasn't colonized, because most European countries were interested in Ethiopia, and even if they were interested, they couldn't even get into it, even if they wanted to. And even if they were, if they were gonna go to Ethiopia by going in Eritrea, they had to cross the deserts of Eritrea, because Eritrea doesn't have deserts like the Sahara, but it does have. It can get hostile in there. And crossing through Sudan means crossing through the hostile Libyan desert and the Nubian desert. In Somalia, they also have desert too, so if they were going to cross through here, it would be very deserty too. But the Italians, they weren't really interested in Ethiopia that much. They only wanted the gold, and like they wanted to get a hold of Eritrea and Somalia. So that's why they didn't even want Ethiopia. Even if they had the chance, they probably wouldn't take it. But yeah, that's why Ethiopia wasn't colonized, because unlike Eritrea and Somalia and Kenya, they both have the Indian Ocean, except for Eritrea. They have the Red Sea. But what matters? Who cares? They both have access to the ocean, so the Italians, what they did to get them is they crossed the Mediterranean Sea, they went through the Suez Canal, and if you don't know what the Suez Canal is, it's like there's a city called Suez, and there's a gulf in Egypt called Gulf of Suez, and there's like a river separating Egypt with North Sinai and South Sinai. And if you don't know what those are just two governorates of Egypt, which are very unpopulated. So this river is called the Suez River, if I'm not wrong, and then it separates North Sinai and South Sinai from Egypt, the rest of Egypt. But anyway, yeah, so they went through the Suez Canal, then entering the Gulf of Suez, and then heading through the Red Sea and started taking on Eritrea, and then they wanted to get Somalia. Somaliland was colonized by the British, the UK, but the rest of Somalia was colonized by Italy, because back then Somaliland just gained independence from Somalia, so it was its own country, and then the UK wanted to colonize it, and then it was just really weird. So that's why Ethiopia wasn't colonized, because the Italians and any other European country couldn't get into Ethiopia without having to cross the deserts. And it's landlocked, so they couldn't even get in if they wanted it. And besides, they weren't interested in Ethiopia that much, but I'm pretty sure if they had the chance, they'd probably take it. So yeah, that's why Ethiopia wasn't colonized. Okay, I hope you learned from this video, and I hope you've enjoyed it. Goodbye.